That question hangs like a shadow over the forgotten corners of Imperial space, but nowhere does it echo more loudly than on the desolate world where Aelius Drakon first drew breath. His story does not begin with glory, nor with triumph, but with a storm, an impossible, warp-touched tempest that swallowed the sky and lit an entire continent with sickly violet fire. On that night, the air tasted of metal, the ground trembled like a living thing, and people whispered prayers through clenched teeth, fearing the Emperor himself had turned away from them. The planet was called Vordam IX, though few cared to remember it. It was a place the Imperium acknowledged only out of bureaucratic necessity, a mining world of cracked deserts, poisoned air, and settlements that clung to survival like dying embers. Life there was harsh, short, and utterly unremarkable. But destiny has a cruel sense of irony, for it chose this forgotten wasteland as the birthplace of its most powerful, and most tragic, son. Aelius entered the world in a collapsed shelter, born amidst cries not of celebration, but of terror. His mother, a miner's widow, had fled the raging warp storm with nothing but instinct and desperation guiding her. The moment he emerged, the storm above changed, its monstrous shrieking quieted, its lightning dimmed, as though acknowledging the infant's arrival. Some would later insist it was coincidence, others would call it a curse. But those present knew the truth even before they dared speak it. The child was different. He did not cry. He simply opened his eyes, unnaturally bright, molten gold irises glowing like embers, and stared into the storm as if he recognized it. The midwife dropped him in fear. The mother shielded him instinctively. And outside, the wind howled with a sound almost like laughter. From the moment he could walk, Aelius moved with a quiet intensity that unsettled those around him. He grew faster than the other children, both in body and mind. His strength was unnatural, even disturbing. Tools meant for adults felt light in his hands, and stone cracked beneath his grip without effort. But it wasn't just strength. He healed from injuries that should have crippled him. He endured cold, heat, hunger, things that broke other children, without complaint. And still, he spoke little. He watched. He listened. He learned. The settlement where he grew, Shardtown, was no place for innocence. It was a ramshackle sprawl of rusted metal and dust-choked corridors, ruled by gangs who cared far more about quotas and intimidation than the people they tormented. Violence was the unspoken language of the world, and fear its currency. Yet even as a young boy, Aelius refused to bow his head in submission. When older youths pushed him, he stood firm. When gangs demanded tribute, he resisted. And when they tried to punish him, they discovered pain meant nothing to him. But Aelius was not cruel. In fact, he showed compassion in a world that had long forgotten the meaning of the word. He often wandered the outer slums, helping the elderly carry their water drums, repairing broken hinges, or sharing what scraps he had. People whispered that he was touched by something divine. Others whispered that he was an omen of calamity. But none could deny that wherever he walked, fear shifted, not because of him, but because of what he represented, a spark of defiance against a world drowning in despair. There was one incident, however, that changed everything. When Aelius was 9, a group of raiders descended on Shardtown, hired by corrupt overseers to discipline the workers. They came armed with shock mauls, chain blades, and cruelty. They dragged families into the street, demanding submission. One raider struck an old man so hard his ribs snapped. A child screamed. A woman begged. And Aelius simply stepped forward. He felt no fear, no hesitation. The raider swung at him with a full-force strike. Aelius caught the weapon midair. The shock maul crackled with lethal energy, but the child's body absorbed it like rainwater striking stone. The raider froze in disbelief. In that heartbeat, something ancient and primal awakened inside Aelius, a protective instinct so powerful it drowned the world in white heat. He struck only once. The raider flew backward several meters, landing unconscious, bones shattered. The others hesitated, stunned not by violence. Violence was normal, but by the impossible sight of a child overpowering a trained killer. That was the moment the settlement realized Aelius Drakon was not just stronger than other boys. He was stronger than men. Stronger than raiders. Stronger than anything Vordam IX had ever seen. And word travels quickly, even in forgotten corners of the Imperium. Within weeks, strange observers began appearing at the edges of Shardtown. Stern-faced figures wearing flak armor and carrying auspex devices. Administratum scribes asking suspiciously detailed questions. And, most ominous of all, a silent group wearing the matte black insignia of an Astartes recruitment detachment, though no one dared speak to them. Aelius felt the change long before the others did. He sensed eyes watching from rooftops. Felt the weight of judgment in the air. Heard whispers at night, fragments of voices that seemed to echo from a place far beyond the material world. The dreams began soon after. Visions of fire-lit battlefields, of colossal armored warriors striding through ash, of impossible beasts roaring in the void. And each morning, he woke with the same distant feeling, as if he was no longer meant to remain on this world. His mother begged him to stay out of trouble. She feared the Imperium's attention as much as she feared the gang's. But destiny does not ask permission. It does not negotiate. It simply moves. And when the Adeptus Astartes finally came for him, descending from the ash-gray sky in thunderous transports that shattered the clouds, the entire settlement fell silent. Men dropped to their knees. Mothers pulled children inside. But Aelius stood alone at the center of Shardtown's square, staring up at them not with awe, but with an unsettling sense of recognition. He had never seen space marines before. Yet somehow, he felt as though he had always been waiting for them. Because on the harsh world of Vordam IX, that question wasn't philosophical. It was survival. And if you stay with this story until the end, you'll uncover the secret truth behind how the strongest space marine who ever lived was forged, piece by brutal piece, in ways the Imperium would never dare admit. Trust me, the reward is worth the journey. Long before Aelius Drakon ever saw a power-armored giant up close, long before he earned names whispered in fear and reverence across dying stars, his first battles weren't fought with bolt or fire, they were fought with hunger, pain, and the cruelty of ordinary men. Nothing in his early life resembled glory. It resembled testing, shaping, sharpening. And the ones who shaped him weren't heroes. They were the gangs, the overseers, and the mercenaries who ruled Vordam IX with an iron grip. After the incident with the raiders, Aelius' existence changed overnight. Where people once ignored him, now they watched him with a strange mix of awe and fear. Where gangs once bullied him, now they whispered, calculating whether he was a useful tool or a threat to be removed. But Aelius didn't seek status, and he didn't bask in the attention. Instead, an unsettling awareness grew inside him, an instinct that he was being pushed toward something he couldn't yet see. The overseers were the first to act. They summoned him to the mines, a place where workers labored until their bodies broke and their lungs failed. Children were rarely allowed inside, but the overseers had one goal, to see if the rumors were true. They handed him a mining tool twice his weight and told him to work until his arms failed. His arms never failed. He cut through ore with a rhythm that made hardened miners pause. His strength grew with each swing, each vibration, each shock absorbed by muscle and bone. The overseers ordered heavier equipment, thinking they could break him or exhaust him into obedience. But the more weight they added, the more Aelius adapted. The more pressure they placed on him, the calmer he became. It was as though hardship wasn't a burden, it was nourishment. Yet it wasn't strength alone that set him apart. In the suffocating tunnels, people saw something more dangerous: defiance. Aelius helped exhausted workers lift collapsed beams. He protected younger children from being sent into unstable shafts. He even intervened when overseers punished miners for falling behind. And every time he did, the same thought rippled through the workforce. What child dares stand up to the overseers? What child doesn't fear pain? What child doesn't know his limits? Aelius didn't know his limits for one simple reason: he didn't have any. Not yet. But Vordam IX wasn't about to stop testing him. The planet itself seemed determined to crush him or shape him. Fights broke out constantly in Shardtown. Supplies dwindled. Raiders returned with greater numbers, paid to terrorize the settlement into discipline. And each confrontation chipped away at Aelius' innocence while sharpening something far more dangerous inside him. One night, when the settlement was plunged into blackout, a group of older boys cornered him in an abandoned corridor. They carried makeshift knives, desperate to assert dominance over the one child they feared more than the gangs. They struck him repeatedly, their blades scraping skin, slicing muscle, yet Aelius didn't scream. He simply endured, blow after blow, cut after cut, until the attackers themselves grew terrified. Then something happened that none of them understood. Where blood should have flowed freely, it stopped. Where wounds should have crippled him, they sealed. His breathing steadied, his posture straightened, and with a calmness that chilled the boys to their bones, Aelius simply walked through them as if pain had no place in his world. From that moment forward, violence no longer followed him, it fled from him. But it wasn't strength that truly marked the turning point. It was something far more unsettling, the dreams. Night after night, Aelius began waking with flashes of a future he didn't recognize, colossal warriors, burning worlds, chainswords screaming, and a haunting symbol he couldn't yet understand. He often woke drenched in cold sweat, gripping the ground with fingers that cracked the stone beneath him. And each time, he whispered a single question to himself. What am I becoming? He wasn't the only one asking. The silent observers who watched him from the outskirts were no longer hiding their interest. Their auspex scanners hummed, their notes grew longer, the air around them felt heavy with purpose. And when they finally stepped out of the shadows, Aelius knew, without being told, that his life was about to be ripped away from everything he had ever known. But here's the irony, the early trials that seemed designed to break him were nothing compared to what awaited him beyond Vordam IX. His childhood was merely the sharpening of the blade. The true forging had yet to begin. And in the grim darkness of the far future, nothing sharpens without blood. The day the Space Marines arrived on Vordam IX, the sky did not brighten, it darkened. Thunder rolled across the wastes in long, crushing waves, and the air grew so heavy that even the hardened miners struggled to breathe. To Shardtown, this was not a visitation. It was an omen. A declaration that fate had come to collect its due. Aelius Drakon felt them long before the transports broke through the cloud cover. A pressure built inside his chest, a weight he couldn't name, like a voice calling him from a place beyond sight. While the settlement panicked, while families barricaded doors and muttered desperate prayers, Aelius simply stood in the open square, staring upward as if he had been waiting for this exact moment his entire life. When the gunmetal dropships descended, their engines flattening buildings and turning dust into swirling storms of grit, even the bravest overseers fell silent. Ramps hissed open. Giants emerged, towering figures encased in black ceramite, their pauldrons marked with the obsidian insignia of a chapter few had ever heard of, the Obsidian Sentinels. This was not a ceremonial visit. No one spoke. No one explained. The Space Marines didn't need to. Their presence alone was an answer. One of them stepped forward, an enormous figure bearing a helm fashioned in the shape of a stern, expressionless visage. His voice rumbled through the square like a seismic tremor, synthesized through a vox grill that distorted every word into something cold and metallic. Aelius Drakon. Step forward. He did not ask how they knew his name. He already understood that his life in Shardtown, his mother's worn hands, the crowded corridors, the dust-choked nights, had come to an end. The knowledge arrived as naturally as breathing. His mother rushed toward him, hysterical, clutching at his shoulders, begging, pleading without forming coherent words. But even her desperate embrace could not stop what was happening. The Space Marine gave her only a single silent nod, not of comfort but of inevitability. Aelius felt her shaking. He felt her tears. Yet something deeper pulled him, something older than fear, stronger than attachment. He stepped out of her arms. The Marines encircled him without a hint of ceremony. One of them passed a scanning device across his body. The auspex beeped in irregular patterns, as if unsure how to classify what it detected. The Marine paused for a moment, visor narrowing with interest. Unusual. Another leaned in. He may survive implantation. Those were words no ordinary child should ever hear, but Aelius understood their meaning instinctively. His life was no longer his own. Without a single explanation, they guided him toward the looming dropship. The ground shook under their armored tread, each step a reminder of the path that lay ahead, a path paved with trials, mutation, pain, and transformation into something no longer human. His mother cried his name until her voice broke. Aelius did not look back. Not out of cruelty, out of certainty. If he turned back now, he would not be able to walk forward. Inside the dropship, the air felt sterile, metallic, and cold. Strange devices hummed. Data pads glowed with biometrics far beyond the understanding of any mortal. Aelius sat silently as two apothecaries inspected him with clinical detachment, murmuring in a language of medical code and gene-line sequences. One of them studied a sample of his blood with growing fascination. This cannot be natural. His physiology is responding to the atmosphere as though adapting in real time. The other replied, then the chapter master's suspicions were correct. The boy is no ordinary candidate. He may be the key to stabilizing our failing gene seed. Aelius listened. He understood little, but he recognized something in their voices, hope mixed with fear. Curiosity laced with dread. They didn't see a child. They saw a weapon in the making. A solution to a problem they had carried for centuries. Hours passed. The storm outside faded as the dropships ascended into the void. Vordam IX shrank below him like a cracked, dying stone. Aelius felt nothing, no sorrow, no nostalgia. Only a quiet acceptance. For the first time, he whispered to himself. Not a question, not a fear, a simple truth. This is where I am meant to be. The apothecaries turned toward him, startled that he had spoken at all. Children taken for Astarte's trials were usually terrified, trembling, overwhelmed. But the boy before them sat with a stillness that unsettled even giants. One of the Marines leaned closer, his voice dropping to a deep, resonant tone. Do you understand what awaits you, child? Aelius met the Marine's helm without a trace of fear. Pain, change, death, if I am not strong enough. The Marine held his gaze for a long, heavy moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something rare, respect. Strength is not your challenge. Control will be. Remember that. As the ship carried him toward the Obsidian Sentinels, Fortress Monastery, toward cybernetic reconstruction, gene seed implantation, impossible training, and a destiny no mortal could prepare for, Aelius Drakon felt the weight of the future pressing against him. He did not shy from it. He embraced it. For in the cold void of space, among legends and monsters, the strongest space marine who ever lived was about to begin his transformation. The fortress monastery of the Obsidian Sentinels was not built to inspire awe, it was built to crush the weak. Its obsidian black walls rose like jagged teeth from the surface of a barren moon, its halls echoing with the weight of centuries of sacrifice. When Aelius Drakon first stepped across its threshold, the temperature dropped, the lights dimmed, and the sound of armored boots reverberated through chambers large enough to swallow cities. It felt less like a sanctuary and more like the inside of some vast, slumbering beast. For most children, the journey from recruit to space marine began with terror. But Aelius felt something different, a strange sense of recognition. As if every corridor, every ritual, every test was a memory resurfacing rather than a new experience. The apothecaries noticed, the chaplains noticed, even the dreadnoughts, ancient warriors entombed in steel, seemed to pause a moment longer when he passed, though none could explain why. The trials began immediately. The first test was endurance. Recruits were marched into a chamber colder than the void outside, stripped to nothing but discipline and determination. Hours passed. Teeth chattered. Bodies trembled. One by one, boys collapsed as hypothermia claimed them. But Aelius simply stood, frost forming on his eyelashes, his breath steady. When the apothecaries examined him afterward, they found his body temperature had barely changed, a biological impossibility. Next came strength. Weighted harnesses were strapped to their bodies, each one heavier than the last, until bones cracked and muscles tore. The overseers watched with pitiless eyes, waiting to see who would break first. But Aelius didn't merely endure, he improved. With every hour, his movements grew smoother, more precise. His muscles didn't tire, they adapted. Then came pain. The reclusium tested the recruits, resolve with trials designed to shatter the spirit. Psychological torment, isolation, simulations that tore the mind apart. Aelius endured each one in silence. He did not scream. He did not beg. He did not fight the pain. He absorbed it, as though pain was a language he had always understood. But not all tests were about suffering. Some were about intellect. In the librarium, scholars assessed how quickly recruits could learn tactics, history, weapon mechanics, and battlefield doctrines. Many struggled with the sheer volume of knowledge. Aelius absorbed it like a sponge. He read faster, processed faster, understood faster. He mastered in weeks what others required years to comprehend. His peers grew suspicious. His instructors grew fascinated. His chaplains grew wary. Because behind his unnatural growth lay something far more unsettling. He was changing, not gradually, not incrementally, rapidly. The gene seed implantation was expected to push recruits to the brink of death. The body rejected, mutated, reformed, and suffered endlessly as foreign organs replaced natural ones. For most, it was agony. For Aelius, it was transformation. His physiology consumed the implants as if they belonged to him from the start. Bones thickened, blood turned richer, his vision sharpened, his strength multiplied. Across the Imperium, rumors began to spread, quiet at first, like faint tremors before a planetary quake. Whispers of artificial giants, of soulless warriors forged in red dust, of the Mechanicus playing God, circulate through covert Vox networks and forbidden data looms. The High Lords deny everything, even as their own agents demand answers. The Inquisition grows restless, split between factions who want to shut Mars down completely and those who secretly encourage the experiments out of growing fear. For the first time since the Horus Heresy, the Imperium finds itself caught between its own survival and its own laws. And still, Mars continues its work in absolute silence. But silence rarely means peace. Within the deep crimson valleys of Mars, where the air vibrates with static charge and ancient machines slumber like dormant titans, a project emerges that eclipses everything attempted before. The Fabricator General authorizes a secretive initiative known only as Project Heliox, the most heretical scientific undertaking since the Emperor walked among mortals. Its goal is not merely to recreate the Space Marines, but to replace them with something that can survive the future humanity is accelerating toward. Something immune to extinction, something that cannot die. The architects of Heliox work in absolute isolation. Their laboratory is a cathedral of steel and burning copper light, suspended above a chasm of molten forges. No human voices echo here, only the grinding of gears, the rhythmic chanting of data prayer, and the constant hum of machines older than Terra's oldest mountains. At the center lies a containment cradle unlike any other. Within it rests a single humanoid figure, suspended in an eerie amber glow. It is not flesh. It is not metal. It is something between, a hybrid organism woven from gene seed templates, living ferroplast, psychically inert marrow, and a lattice of self-repairing nanostructures. The priests call it the Heliox prototype. Before activating the prototype, the Mechanicus attempts one last safeguard: they simulate consciousness. They inject digitally coded behavioral templates, loyalty, discipline, strategic instinct, through neurocircuits grown like crystalline vines within the prototype's skull. Yet nothing stabilizes. Each template dissolves before imprinting. The hybrid body rejects programming, rejects identity, rejects intention. The prototype is alive but empty, a mind waiting for something unnamed, something the Mechanicus cannot give. Eventually, the decision is made, activate it anyway. When the containment cradle opens, the chamber plunges into total darkness. Emergency cog lights flicker to life in scattered pulses of crimson. The prototype steps forward, not with the thunderous gait of a space marine, but with slow, measured movements, like a newborn adapting to gravity for the first time. Its eyes glow with a dim, unreadable shimmer, neither warp-tainted nor purely mechanical. Something other. The tech priests approach it cautiously, their mechadendrites trembling with both awe and dread. They attempt basic commands. The prototype obeys. They test its strength. It surpasses every known biological benchmark. They test its reflexes. It reacts faster than any human-derived neural pathway should allow. They test its resilience. It regenerates. And yet, the prototype does not speak, does not express emotion, does not display the faintest trace of human will. It simply exists, waiting for direction like a perfectly balanced blade. For the Mechanicus, this is enough. They celebrate the achievement quietly, reverently. In their eyes, they have created something superior to the Astartes, warriors who cannot succumb to mutation, who do not rely on unstable gene seed, and who do not require a soul that can be preyed upon by the warp. Pure function, pure efficiency, a new kind of soldier. But not everyone sees a miracle. The Inquisition learns of Heliox through covert channels. A heavily encrypted report reaches Terra describing entities without psychic presence, warriors immune to both faith and corruption, and a class of soldier impossible to spiritually influence. To the Ordo Hereticus, that sounds not like salvation, but a threat. A soldier who cannot be judged, cannot be controlled, cannot be guided, either by fear, by devotion, or by the Emperor's lingering psychic light, is a soldier who belongs to no one. The High Lords convene in secret. Some argue that Heliox represents humanity's only hope for survival. Others insist that Mars has finally crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Beneath the layers of bureaucracy and ceremony, the fear is simple and primal. If the Mechanicus can create warriors with no soul, what prevents them from creating an army with no loyalty? As the debate intensifies across the Imperium, the prototype stands motionless in a Martian vault, silent, obedient, unaware of the storm it has already unleashed. It does not know what it is. It does not know what it was meant to replace. It does not know the legacy of giants that came before it. But deep within its hybrid neural core, something begins to stir. Something neither mechanical nor human. Something waiting for a spark, though no one knows whether that spark will bring salvation, evolution, or annihilation. The silence inside the Mechanicus vault deepens as the Heliox prototype remains perfectly still, its unreadable gaze fixed forward as if staring into a non-existent horizon. Around it, tech priests move with sacred precision, recording biochemical fluctuations, neural patterns, and metabolic cycles with obsessive reverence. But across Mars, beyond the steel walls and sacred forges, something else is happening, something the Mechanicus did not expect. In the warp, in the psychosphere, in the lingering spiritual echo of the Imperium's fallen giants, a disturbance forms. The extinction of the Space Marines had created a psychic void, a rippling absence that had once been filled with unwavering purpose, brotherhood, and sacrifice. Billions had prayed to these superhuman warriors for 10,000 years. Entire planets had whispered their names in their darkest nights. Their deaths left behind something like a cosmic wound, an ache that pulsed through the warp like a fading heartbeat. Now, thanks to Project Heliox, that wound begins to shift. Not heal, not close, but shift, as if something in the warp has noticed that humanity is attempting to fill the void left by its greatest champions. And whatever this presence is, it is not silent. Imperial psychers across dozens of star systems begin collapsing mid-ritual, screaming about shadows wearing armor of flesh metal, about giants without faces, about spirits clawing at the void where the Astartes used to be. Astropaths report phantom signals, echoes of space marine battle cries, fractured oaths of loyalty, and pleas for vengeance that distort into static before they can be translated. At first, these reports are dismissed as psychic residue, the lingering aftershocks of extinction. But soon the patterns become too consistent, too organized, too deliberate. Something is trying to speak. Something is trying to return. Something old. Something powerful. Something angry. Meanwhile, on Mars, the Heliox prototype begins to display anomalies. Only the most sensitive Auspex instruments detect them, microscopic shifts in neural activity, flickers of unidentifiable energy at the edge of its consciousness. It begins turning its head toward empty corners of the room, reacting to stimuli no human, no machine, no sensor can detect. The tech priests dismiss this as emergent behavior. But Amagos biologist observing the readings in secret feels something icy and primal coil in her chest. These signals are not mechanical. They are not biological. They are not even natural. They are responses. And then the dreams begin. At first, they are small tremors within the Imperium, fragmented visions spreading like a fever. Sleepers across the Imperium, soldiers, scribes, common laborers, even children, begin dreaming of towering figures marching across battlefields lit by dying suns. But these giants are not the noble Astartes they remember from hololithic murals. These figures are warped by memory and darkness, shifting shapes of armor and shadow, eyes burning like dying stars, voices echoing in languages that scrape against the mind. In every dream, the giants do the same thing. They point toward Mars, and they whisper a single word. Not in low Gothic, not in high Gothic, but in something older, something primal, something that makes the dreamers wake up gasping. Return. The Inquisition grows alarmed. Dream propagation on a mass scale is no coincidence. Psychers report that the dreams emanate from a single point in the warp, the enormous psychic imprint left behind by the Space Marines, an echo preserved by 10 millennia of devotion. The phenomenon becomes known as the Echo Legion, a phantom army of memories and spiritual residue. At first, the Echo Legion seems harmless, a collective hallucination shaped by grief. But soon, psychers begin reporting something far more sinister. The Echo Legion is searching. Searching for a host. Searching for form. Searching for vessels. And every psychic trace they follow leads them back to Mars, to the Heliox prototype. Back beneath Olympus Mons, the prototype stands motionless in its chamber, unaware of the billions of minds dreaming of its existence. Unaware that something vast and fractured is drifting toward it through the warp like a dying constellation. The tech priests continue their studies, but they do not realize that the prototype's neural lattice has begun recording signals it was never designed to detect. It is absorbing psychic data, not directly, but as residual impressions echoing through the warp's thinning veil. And for the first time, something resembling thought stirs within its hollow consciousness. Not a sentence, not a memory, not an emotion, just a feeling, a pull, a call. A sensation of wanting. The prototype raises its head. For the first time, its fingers twitch. For the first time, its breathing deepens. For the first time, it wakes. Not because the Mechanicus succeeded. Not because its systems reached stability. But because the Echo Legion has finally found something to cling to. A vessel of flesh and metal empty enough for their fractured souls to fill. Yet strong enough to carry the weight of their rage. As the hybrid warrior takes its first conscious step, the alarms across Mars flicker, glitch, then scream. Because this awakening was not supposed to happen. The alarms that erupt across Mars do not begin with sound, they begin with light. A blinding surge of white gold static explodes through every cogitator, every lumen strip, every sensor array. For a heartbeat, the entire red planet seems to flicker out of existence, swallowed by a wash of raw, uncontrolled data. Tech priests reel as their augmetic eyes overload, mechadendrites convulsing like live serpents. Even the noosphere, the collective electronic mind of the Mechanicus, screams in a burst of distortion so intense that thousands of tech adepts collapse mid-task, their neural implants frying in their skulls. And at the center of it all, standing motionless in the containment chamber beneath Olympus Mons, the Heliox prototype opens its eyes, not with mechanical coldness, not with blank obedience, but with a depth that should be impossible for a creature without a soul. Its eyes shine with memories that are not its own, pain that wasn't created in a laboratory, oaths it never swore, wars it never fought. 1,000 voices cry inside its mind, each one belonging to a warrior who once walked the galaxy as an Astartes, now only a fragmented echo drifting in the warp's shadow. The Echo Legion has found its anchor. The tech priests in the chamber freeze, confusion twisting into creeping horror as their instruments begin to spike uncontrollably. The prototype's psychic inertness was once absolute, but now its readings resemble a star-going supernova. The hybrid body should not be capable of channeling warp resonance. Its marrow is psychically null. Its organs are designed to resist immaterial intrusion. But the Echo Legion is not intruding, they are inhabiting. Not as demons, not as warped spirits, but as souls searching for a body that can carry their legacy. One Mago stumbles back, whispering in disbelief. Impossible, it has no astral signature, how can echoes bind to emptiness? But emptiness is precisely why they chose it. A hollow vessel is the easiest to fill. The prototype lifts its head, slow, heavy, as though the weight of 1,000 ghost memories drags against its synthetic nerves. It takes 2 steps forward, the impact shaking the ground with a force far greater than its frame should allow. Each movement is unsteady, as if dozens of wills are fighting for control inside one body. Its breath comes in ragged bursts, like someone drowning in a sea of voices. Then, without warning, its posture straightens. Its hands relax. Its breathing steadies. The echoes have synchronized, merged, harmonized into something new. Not a space marine, not an artificial titan, not a soul, not a machine, but a fusion of memory and matter, a being shaped by the residue of extinction, given form by the desperation of humanity's forgotten giants. The chamber doors slam open as Skitarii guards rush in, weapons locked and ready. Mars emergency protocols dictate immediate neutralization of unstable bioforms. The guards form a semicircle, their galvanic rifles humming, targeting lenses focusing. Tech priests scream warnings, but they come too late. The prototype turns toward the soldiers. The room darkens, not physically, psychically. The air vibrates with the presence of warriors long dead, their rage whispering through the hybrid body. And for the first time, the prototype speaks. Its voice is deep, layered, distorted by the spectral tones of countless echoes. A single sentence, ancient, sacred, and spoken in the solemn cadence of a warrior order that no longer exists. For the Emperor, the Skitarii hesitate, not from fear, but from confusion. That hesitation lasts 1 second too long. The prototype moves, but not with violent intent. It simply raises its hand. Yet the gesture unleashes a shockwave that detonates every lumen in the chamber, every auspex panel, every servo skull. The Skitarii are hurled backward as if struck by an Astartes dreadnought. The tech priests recoil, their minds racing. The prototype is not attacking. It is reacting, instinctively, defensively, guided by emotions that do not belong to it. Memories flash inside its mind, visions of battles from across 10 millennia. Ultramarine brothers falling beside shattered banners. Space wolves howling through blizzards of heretic fire. Blood angels descending like crimson meteors upon swarms of Xenos. Every echo pours a lifetime of war into the hybrid frame, shaping musculature, reflex, posture, stance. The Echo Legion is no longer a phantom. It is becoming a soldier. A singular entity, built from countless fallen champions. But the awakening has consequences. Across the warp, something ancient and monstrous notices. Something that has hunted the Astartes for millennia senses the spark of their return, no matter how faint, no matter how distorted. The psychic wound left by extinction shifts once more, drawing attention, not from fractured spirits but from predators. The prototype stumbles, clutching its head as a new wave of pressure slams into its mind. Not from Mars, not from the living, but from beyond the Imperium's veil. As if the warp itself is reaching for it, curious, hungry, amused. The Echo Legion murmurs through the hybrid's mind, whispering warnings, ancient instincts rising like fire. They know this presence. They fought it for 10,000 years. Chaos has sensed the rebirth. And it is coming. The alarms across Mars continue to howl, not just for a containment breach, not just for psychic anomalies, but for something far greater. A storm is rising. A second extinction is already beginning. And in the heart of Mars, the first warrior of a new, unnatural era stands trembling, not with fear, but with the impossible weight of 1,000 ghost soldiers urging it to stand tall. The prototype breathes in. All the echoes breathe with it. Something new has been born. Something impossible. Something dangerous. The moment Chaos senses the awakening of the Echo Legion, the warp shudders like a wounded beast. The psychic void left by the extinction of the Space Marines had been a feast, an open grave where demons writhed through memories, savoring the despair of a galaxy robbed of its mightiest defenders. But now that void flickers with a new, unfamiliar light. Not strong, not stable, but defiant, a spark, a challenge, a whisper that the Astartes, those hated, beloved, relentless, maddening foes, might not be gone forever. And Chaos hungers. The first crack appears along the edge of the Phobos maelstrom, a place where reality is already thin as smoke. The warp buckles outward, forming a distortion that pulses like a heartbeat. From within that impossible light, a presence stirs, ancient, hateful, and delighted by the scent of returning prey. Thousands of demonic entities swarm toward the tear, screeching in warped imitation of laughter. They do not wait for an invitation. They erupt across the void like a plague of impossible colors. The galaxy's long simmering silence fractures. On Mars, the Mechanicus realizes what they have unleashed. Not a savior, not a weapon, not a replacement for the Astartes, but a beacon. A flare of psychic distress bright enough to attract every predator in the Imperium. In the dimly lit chamber beneath Olympus Mons, the prototype, still trembling under the weight of the Echo Legion, senses the shift in the warp. A cold dread washes through its borrowed memories. Phantom voices erupt inside its mind, shouting warnings in the languages of long-dead chapters. It drops to one knee, not because of external force, but because of the crushing pressure of terror echoing through its stolen consciousness. The tech priests watch in fascinated horror. Their creation is powerful, but it is not ready. Not stable, not whole. Yet the warp does not care. War never waits for perfection. War comes when it chooses. Suddenly, the noosphere explodes with priority alerts from across the solar system. Demon incursions detected in the outer layers of the Sol sphere. Unidentified warp rifts opening beyond Terra's orbit. The Phobos maelstrom is expanding unnaturally. Contact lost with multiple Blackstone monitoring stations. Even the Astronomicon flickers, a dimming heartbeat echoing across the psychic winds. Chaos is not simply attacking. Chaos is converging, drawn like sharks to the scent of blood in the water. Drawn to Mars. The ground beneath the red planet trembles as the first shockwave hits the atmosphere, a ripple of reality distortion that makes the air shimmer. Skitarii legions mobilize instantly, Titan cohorts awaken in their hangars, and the Mechanicus initiates protocol sequences reserved for the end of the world. But everything is too slow. Chaos is too fast. The Predator has already sunk its claws in. As the Mechanicus prepares for battle, a small tremor shakes the chamber. The prototype rises to its feet, slowly, painfully, as if fighting against a storm inside its skull. But its eyes burn brighter than before. Not with the emptiness of a machine. Not with the hollow glow of engineered flesh. But with something fierce, fractured, and ancient. The Echo Legion is awakening fully now, pushing through the prototype's unused pathways, claiming territory across its hybrid nerves. Memories fuse with instincts. Pain merges with purpose. Voices become one.